I am so happy with how this looks for the Rangers. We have a pitcher, Jack Leiter, and he is a dude.
And while I do think his hitting is worse than Derek Jeter, it's not that far off.
You're not mentioning 2006. You can mention the other people, not 2006.
Oh, just because I bought the best soap doesn't mean your room's going to be clean. It just leaves it to where I don't believe that the Canadians had a shot.
I really don't like the Clippers just kind of sending it in when they're like...
Hi, this is Kelly Forbes with the Dallas Stars, and you're listening to Outsiders Opinions with Kevin and Austin.
What's up, y'all? Welcome to our Outsiders Opinions of the Week for the NHL. And man, the divisional races are heating up. You know, the man that also has a close division race as well as my team, Austin.
Yeah, this has been a good season for divisional races, except for about one of them. They're all really, really close. And at this point in the season, I don't think we have any definitive answers on who will win them.
Yeah, and I believe the West. So we've talked about the Central, and it seems like whoever wins the Central could earn the number one overall seed in the West.
That's true, but the Canucks are right there as well, so it'll be close between them. But yeah, the winner of the Central will have a good chance because right now the number one seed is still the Canucks points wise.
Yes. Well, points, Stars have won, or 99 points, but point percentage, they're higher.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so we're going to use points percentage because the Stars have played more games than the Canucks, and same with the Winnipeg Jets, were one. But yeah, so I think we'll just talk about the Central, then we'll go into the other divisions.
Sure.
So this one, I'm going to say is pretty close. You have Colorado. They are just 2 points behind, and then Winnipeg is 3 points behind, but the Stars have played an extra game, so we'll just see how that turns out.
Yeah, it's going to be really close up until the end. The Stars have been very good at getting points after regulation. They've won a good bit of games in overtime. They've won, I believe, 11 games in overtime or shootout, and they have lost 9 in overtime or shootout. So they've been getting a lot of games to that extra period, while the Winnipeg Jets have 39 wins in regulation. Stars only have 34. But winning those games in overtime and also getting those points is huge, and I think that has really helped them get to this point.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The Stars are always great at getting to overtime if their defense falters or if their offense just scores to tie up the game. And Colorado, that game against the Penguins was just insane when they were down 4-0. And yes, they did force an overtime, and then they won this past weekend. But yeah, we can move on to another close division, I believe. It looks like your division, the Atlantic Division and the Eastern, is starting to get close, as the Florida Panthers were really on the really high to start up and were really dominating. But now they've fallen. They're currently the 2 seed based on points, but point percentage, Boston is second.
Yeah, but the Panthers did just lose to Boston a couple nights ago, and that was definitely huge. It's really only up to those 3. What's crazy to me is that there's 4 teams in the East in total that have 97 plus points, and no one else even has 90. So a lot of really, really of the best teams in the league are in the East, but then there's not really that middle tier of great teams. It just goes from elite to good.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think that leads to the Metropolitan Division, where it's just the 2 seeds, the New York Rangers versus the Hurricanes. That one's pretty close, but like you said, the East is really just 2-headed races in the divisions.
Yeah, it's really up to Rangers and Hurricanes, and then obviously for the Atlantic, it's like you said, Boston and Florida. I The Metro has really been a bad division besides those top two. Now, someone between the Flyers, Capitals, Devils, Islanders, Penguins will end up getting that third spot and not have to worry about being a wild card team. And technically, right now, the Capitals are a wild card team because there isn't that many good teams outside of or below the Lightning. Like the Red Wings, Sabres, Senators, and Canadians have really struggled this year. So we'll see how that ends up. But I do think it's really noticeable the difference between the top teams and those just good teams that make it into the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think I forgot to mention this. It's important. I believe it's important to get the number 1 seed. I don't think you should waste everything to get the number 1 seed or the number 1 pick in your division. But if you can do it, it just gives you an easier path in the playoffs. Just so because if you're the 2 and 3, imagine for the Panthers, it seems more important in the West as we talked about the little gap, or maybe it's bigger than the gap between the 2 headed races. But I think if you go over to the West, so we can talk about this more in the Pacific Division, this one is pretty locked up. You have the Canucks and then the Oilers at 2 with 90. The Canucks are at 98 points. And then you have the Kings with 87.
Yeah, the Oilers are another team that has really struggled to end games in regulation, but they've won a fair amount of their overtime games. Of the 14 overtime games that they play, they've won 10 of them. And that's kind of helped them stay, quote-unquote, in the race, but they are still pretty far back of the Canucks, and a lot of crazy things would have to happen for them to pass them.
Yeah, so if we kind of go down this road of the Edmonton Oilers, if they could somehow get the 1 seed, that would be huge, kind of to focus on the point of why the number 1, why that being the division winner is better, because you go from being the Oilers and having to face the Kings, or even the Vegas Golden Knights in the first round to later. And where you're the Canucks, you probably would face Calgary or the Predators. If you're
the 8 seed right now is Vegas.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so it's pretty tough for the West. Can you talk a little bit more about why, or what would you be doing as a coach in these tough divisions? I think we can agree the closest division race is probably the Central.
If you're talking throughout the board, yes. But at the top, I would argue no, though. I think Boston, Florida is a tighter matchup because if you just look at the match they just played where it was a 4-3 game, I think it's extremely, extremely close between those two. But if we're looking at the entire division, the Central is definitely the better one because they have 4 teams with 90-plus points. If you're asking how to play this, just play consistently. Now, you don't need to be playing your starters or your top 6 and top 4 defensemen a considerable amount of time over their counterpoints in the bottom 6 and your last 2 D pair. And you also want to make sure that you're still getting your backup goalie reps and that you're not just overplaying the starter because that really could be detrimental. But you do want to make sure that you don't get too complacent and drop points because you don't want to be, if you're the 1 seed right now like Dallas is, you would rather not play the Jets or Avalanche in the first round. You would rather face, which right now would be, by points percentage, the Predators. But, I mean, it is so tight that I don't think you really care where you're matched up right now. You just want to make sure that you have a home series as long as possible. That's what's more important about being the 1 seed than anything. It's just you'll have more home games. It's not really you care who you play because all the top 8 teams in the West are so tight that it doesn't really matter if you're playing any one of those teams. What does matter is getting that 4th game in your home building where you can win it on your home ice guaranteed.
Yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, I didn't really think about I've been thinking a lot about the matchups, but even if the Stanley Cup playoffs are just so intense that, yeah, that 4th game would be.
You will have to play every team you're scared of, you'll have to play to win a cup. So it's more about being on home ice the entirety of the playoffs that you're really pushing for than it is matchups wise.
And not just home ice, you get your home bed. You're not staying in a hotel for a critical game 7 and getting
Yeah, and the crowd's behind you, and you know your routines in your building, and you can execute better.
Yeah, so I think that's a great way to end it, and I'll toss this over to you. So you believe, to answer the question in the video, the closest race is probably Pacific. Or no, Atlantic.
No. Atlantic.
Atlantic, yeah.
If we're going by the tightest at the very top, I think Boston and the Panthers will come down to the absolute and utter wire. But if we are going by which division is the closest overall, it would be the Central because they have so many teams. But which divisional race will end up being the closest, I do think, is the Atlantic.
Okay, I'm going to go Central just because there are scenarios where the Jets get the number 1 or the Colorado Avalanche or even the Stars.
Yeah, we'll see. But the Panthers and Boston are so close that it could be 1 point that separates them.
All right, yeah, that's a great point, and I'll let you close this episode out.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening. Which divisional race do you guys think will be the closest? And please catch us in the next video.